It's finally here, guys. The Nate DeWalt episode of How to Get Away with Meta. Before we get into that, my name's Phil Birch from Unfun Stuff, and this is another episode of How to Get Away with Meta. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, leave me some comments on who you want to see for the next character, and as always, turn on your notifications so you can see when I post the latest videos and be the first ones to comment and all that cool stuff. But yeah, like I said, guys, we're going to be talking about Nate DeWalt's favorite character and somebody that I personally had rated way too low prior to the Orlando Regional and seeing really what she could do with some of the newer stuff. Momo. Momo on her face is an incredibly consistent defensive character who can really offer just tons and tons of protection that a lot of the other decks in the format need to have build up to do, right? Her first effect to destroy one foundation combines the best parts of Release, Rising Starlet, just a consistent building ability. Like you get it all pretty much from Momo on the top effect. And her bottom effect, once per turn, you can go into your deck or your discard pile for any weapon card. And that's incredibly powerful when you get to a state of the game where you aren't necessarily losing out from blowing up and removing all of your own foundations. We're very specifically going to be speaking about Life Momo in this video because I think that Life Momo has found itself to be probably the most well balanced of the builds, particularly with introduction of cards like Staff Strike and or not Staff Strike. I'm so sorry, Cannon Blast with the life package itself, right? Life decks all around got a huge buff with Cannon Blast because it can present a large, consistent damage output for the low price of one attack, right? So why not Staff Strike, which I just said obviously we're not talking about because we don't play. Staff Strike is a incredibly like high rolly card that doesn't actually really benefit from anything else, right? You're going to be playing a ton of attacks if you're playing Staff Strike, right? Well, those attacks don't get any extra damage. They're just base damage attacks realistically with Momo because she's not Jiro. Staff Strike and Jiro is incredible because you can throw charge weapons at the end of the string, and those charge weapons get huge stats across the board, right? With Momo, we can give them speed, but we can't necessarily give them damage. So unless our hand would be like two Staff Strikes, the ability to play both of them, and then like two Cannon Blasts to throw at the end, and like a couple of other filler attacks at the beginning and stuff like that. It's not gonna feel as good to play. Whereas you could just construct a really consistent attack turn with cards like Cannon Blast, and then you could play like Home Run Comets and stuff like that because there are a lot of really cool and good life weapons. So I want to show you guys the top 16 deck piloted by Kevin Broberg, just so we can go over a little bit of these like really powerful weapons that you might not necessarily see immediately if you aren't really looking for them, right? You get Home Run Comet, which is a weapon and a charge, right? So that's a really cool card for like Jiro. But in Momo, it's an awesome tutorable +1 mid block. Instant Shining Flash, that's a +1 low block that you can also tutor up with your effect. And then obviously Capture Net's your high block. So you have a very nice spread of zones for your ability to tutor. And as you can see in Kevin's deck, post board, you can tutor up Net Gun Surprises, which is incredible, right? Like, because that's gonna like represent so much speed reduction from your character standpoint, as well as Net Gun Surprise. You're basically negating a couple of attacks there just by grabbing one copy of the card. Now, there are other little cool tech pieces in this deck as well, right? Like Electromagnetic Stomp gets to ready your quick creations, which allows you to, continuously go further, continue your loops of like Rising Starlet and stuff like that, where you can gain your health back and keep your board kind of at a consistent state while still playing more and more attacks. I will say that I was not super high on this deck, but like after looking at the lists and after seeing how well it performed in the Orlando Regional, I do think that this is a very top contender for one of the best defensive decks that still has an incredibly strong offensive output. Yeah, the game might have to go a little bit longer for Momo to realize the same damage potentials as, say, like a like an Asui or something, right? But she's gonna have the best ability to get to that state of the game as long as she can get some good cards set up, right? If she can get out quick creations, she has the ability to not necessarily lose cards while building or while destroying them with her own effects, as well as cards like you can always build in like you're preparing for battles, your rising starlets, stuff like that, while attacking. Like you get just a really cool balance of things you can do. I think that the character is really neat for anybody who wants to take on the test of like the thought experiment, right? Because it's a lot of thinking, and it's shown that it can be a very strong deck. Like Nate's done incredibly well in some provisionals with Momo as well. I mean, not necessarily the life one, but like Momo, the character itself, with a lot of thought and a lot of practice, can be one of like the best decks in the format just because she has the ability to consistently grab attacks or blocks. And she has that consistent ability of having release like on her face, right? Like you are always going to be able to destroy for -2 speed. So even if you're blowing up your whole board to block, you aren't dying. And you can always reload. I think that the ability for her to make cannon blasts like just that incredibly strong move, right? And with her ability that becomes a 9 high for 11 damage attack, much like it would in Asui, right? And that's the things that people really love about Cannon Blast and Asui is that it becomes such a strong move that is even faster than it's intended to be. Couple that with her new foundations, Good Group Leader, and you're getting to pay a little bit of these abilities even for free, which is just phenomenal. I think this is a good representation of the best usage of life's defensive and long game strategies, right? It's got the same stuff you're seeing in every other life deck. You've got your release in there, you've got rescue completeds, you've got you've got the face shields, stuff like that to keep the game manageable. And then when you get to a later state, this deck is just going to be blocking for free like crazy, right? You have amphibiouses when you are bringing down foundations and clearing them out of your card pool to untap. You have Precious Lesson to build in more cards. Like this is just a cool deck. It's a very cool deck, and I'm very happy to see Kevin did well with it, and I look forward to seeing iterations of this in the future from a lot more strong players as well, because Kevin's a great player, and bringing this to like the forefront definitely puts it more on people's radar, which sucks for people who want to attack and kill people early, because I think this deck is gonna really put a wrench in that, and I actually like that a lot. I like when the format goes a little bit further. That feels better for me. When games go a little bit longer, that's kind of where I like to play. I'm not opposed to killing people on turn two, and like I definitely think it's cool, but I don't want to see it every single turn. So I hope Momo and Kirishima 2 being in the meta really slows down the game for some people and gets people thinking a little bit more, and I love that. As for weaknesses of the deck, I do think that it is susceptible to definitely to early game aggression. You certainly have to have time to build up your resources, so stuff like Asui and Tokiyami can still be very strong matchups into it. Particularly, I believe, like decks that put a lot of speed on things, right? So the Tokiyami and Asui obviously are adding speed to stuff. Um, Even like a Jiro playing like the good symbol, right, where you get to have your big staff strike turns like we talked about earlier. She's adding a bunch of speed to those moves. And the deck does have encouraging training partners, but it doesn't necessarily have all of the means to deal with all that huge number of speed. Um, if your opponent does end up with good deadlock answers or has answers to your assets, you could find yourself struggling a little bit as well, right? Like Wire Arrow is a good card against the deck because it does at least remove one of them for the time being. Yeah, I mean, as long as you can clear out a little bit of your opponent's resources, or if you have good deadlock threats or good deadlock answers, I think that she does have hard times dealing with those type of things. Another one that seems like it would be a bit of a tough matchup for her would be Eraserhead. I think Eraserhead is positioned remarkably well in the format to deal with a lot of these, um, a lot of the good decks in the format. I do think it is a much grindier game if you're trying to think about doing something like that, but being able to hold her off of her speed reduction on key moves of yours, being able to prevent her from searching for another block when she's overextended maybe a little bit, or searching for another attack when she's maybe fishing a little bit more, does seem like it would be a very good game plan in theory, right? Like I've never tested Eraserhead into Momo. I'm not even gonna pretend I have. That one's just like in my head. It makes sense because she has two really good two-way abilities, and they're both enhances. So he does get to shut that down just a little bit. I would say if you find yourself face to face with Momos, I would definitely say you're looking for an early aggression, for sure, though, right? It doesn't matter what deck you're playing. You want to try and get as much damage as you can in early without overextending yourself to a point where you're able to die. Because there is going to be a point where the game gets tough and it becomes more reliant on who can construct a nicer kill turn. So if they are lower when you do that, it means you don't have to be as fine with it, as sharp. You can kind of even make a little bit of a worse turn out of it because it wouldn't necessarily be the full 20 billion you got to do to her, right? You don't got to 20 million bajillion. You just got to do like 8 or 9 or 10 or some shit like that if you get early poking, which is great. Which is great. Anyway, guys, I think that is gonna cover up Life Momo and just like a basic standpoint. Once again, to go over strengths, right? You have great blocking, you have great access to blocking. You have an excellent tutor that you can use on both turns. Yes, these cards do have costs, but if you get to a late enough board state, those costs are pretty much mitigated by your ability to manipulate your foundations enough. Um, Her attack turns are very explosive with Cannon Blast because they are 9 high 11s that she can play pretty reliably through her ability and the ability to kind of keep her staging area readied and firing at you with quick creation and her own ability to build the card in, right? So she can get off a lot of damage very quickly, and she can also play defense for a very long time. Like, you have to be pretty mentally prepared to play potentially a best of one against this character, and that's not necessarily mean you're going to win that best of one. Now, for weaknesses, if you can get in the damage early enough before she can set up, it does put her really far on the back foot because she is going to have to try and rebuild her staging area if she's been destroying the block. And that does give you time to get ahead in the race, which is awesome. That's perfect for you, right? If you have direct answers to her cards on board, like apathetic or irrefutable force of nature, stuff like that, is going to be very strong as well because she is going to be a little bit more reliant on some of her foundations, not necessarily just to blow them up, but they do have great effects to activate and then blow up as well. Yeah. Anyway, guys, that is my how to get away with meta video on Momo. Life Momo particularly, because I don't find the other two symbols to be too terribly strong. But yeah, be sure to leave comments, guys, on who you want to see next. And I really hope that you have been enjoying these series of how to get away with meta. It'll probably end up slowing down a little bit or getting to a little bit more fun characters past this point because we have really covered the top end of the meta unless something shows up and just surprises the crap out of me. All right. Anyway, guys, I am off to Gen Con. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week, and I hope to see a ton of you there. If you do see me there, be sure to ask me for my character card. I will have a bunch on me. They're already packed. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week with another episode of How to Get Away with Meta.